Today we dig deep into the roots of the Israel-Gaza conflict by going back, way before the 20th century, to understand the lay of the land and the people who lived there. Our story begins in the ancient lands of the Middle East, where the early chapters of the Israeli and Palestinian narratives take shape. Here, in the Levant, civilizations bloomed beside the fertile banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and the city of Jerusalem emerged as a hub for many. Now, let's travel back to around 1050 BCE. Here we find the ancient kingdoms of Israel and Judah. This is where the Jewish connection to the land starts. But the land wasn't just home to one group. Over centuries, a mix of empires and peoples, Babylonians, Romans, Byzantines, each left their mark, creating a rich blend of cultures and traditions. Fast forward to the 7th century, and we see the Islamic conquests sweeping through, establishing a significant Arab presence. This era shaped the region's political and cultural identity, intertwining faiths and traditions. Moving on, the early 16th century welcomed the Ottoman Empire's rule, providing a relative calm and an organized administrative system where Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived together, despite the usual political struggles and changes. Now, as the 19th century rolled in, the winds of change began to blow. The idea of Zionism started to take shape in Europe, aiming to establish a homeland for Jews in Palestine. This idea didn't stay within European borders. It reached the Ottoman rulers and the people living in Palestine, creating ripples that would later turn into waves of change. At the same time, the Ottoman Empire was losing its grip, creating a space that European powers were keen to fill. The First World War was a game changer. It redrew the map, leading to the famous or infamous Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916, splitting control among the victorious Allies. This was a plot twist, setting the scene for many modern-day conflicts in the Middle East. As the Ottoman rule faded, the British took charge of Palestine. This was more than just a change in administration. It was a time when the national hopes of both Jewish and Arab communities grew stronger, setting the stage for the tense atmosphere we see in the 20th century. The British Mandate period was crucial. It was a time of promise, conflict, and change. It was a time when the identities of Palestinians and Israelis were being defined, challenged, and redefined. This period laid down many of the political and social tracks that the train of the Israel-Palestine conflict would later speed along. So, as we inch closer to the 20th century, with its promise of nation-states and the dark clouds of conflict, it's important to have this historical backdrop well in mind. It sets the stage for the later events, the agreements, the wars, and the ongoing struggle for identity and land. This was a time that saw the hopes, fears, and ambitions of different communities take a concrete shape, setting the path for the complexer reality we are about to delve into in the next lectures, especially focusing on the Israel-Gaza War of 2023, which forms the core of our study in this course.
We now transition into a period of profound geopolitical shifts, kicking off with the Balfour Declaration in 1917. This document, penned by British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour, expressed British support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. This declaration didn't just remain on paper, it fueled aspirations and led to tangible Jewish immigration to Palestine, further entrenching the Zionist movement. Moving ahead, the 1920s and 30s were turbulent times in Palestine. Jewish immigration continued to increase, spurred by the Zionist movement and harsh conditions for Jews in Europe. Meanwhile, the local Arab population began to feel the squeeze and feared losing their land and rights. This fear gave birth to rising tensions, protests, and violent outbreaks. As we step into the 1940s, the horrors of the Holocaust during World War II intensified the urgency for a Jewish homeland, while the Arab population in Palestine continued to voice their opposition against British policies and Jewish immigration. The stakes were high, and the pot of tension was simmering, ready to boil over. Now let's talk about a crucial milestone, the United Nations Partition Plan of 1947. The plan proposed splitting Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem as an international city. This was a major international attempt to solve the growing conflict, but it was not well received by everyone. While the Jewish leadership accepted the plan, the Arab leadership did not, viewing it as an infringement on their rights to the land. The UN partition plan was like throwing a stone in a still pond. It created ripples that soon turned into waves of change. It was a direct precursor to the end of British Mandate in 1948 and set the stage for the First Arab-Israeli War, a major conflict that shaped the geopolitical boundaries of the modern Middle East. In this period, we see the international community stepping in, trying to solve the conflict, but instead, often adding fuel to the fire. The decisions made during this time, the movements that gained momentum, and the international involvement laid a complex foundation for the Israel-Palestine conflict. This segment of history is crucial because it's here that the seeds of modern-day conflict were sown. The ideologies, policies, and international decisions of this period played a significant role in shaping the events that unfolded in the subsequent decades leading up to the current Israel-Gaza War of 2023. As we venture deeper into the historical labyrinth in the next lectures, we'll continually come back to this period to better understand the roots of the ongoing conflict. Now we traverse into a watershed era, beginning with the year 1948, a time marked by the cessation of the British Mandate, the proclamation of the State of Israel, and the onset of the First Arab-Israeli War. This period was not just a chapter but a volume in the lengthy narrative of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. With the end of the British Mandate in May 1948, the Jewish leadership promptly declared the establishment of the State of Israel. This declaration was not received passively. It was a call to arms for neighboring Arab states who viewed the creation of Israel as a disservice to the Palestinian Arab population. They promptly invaded, marking the start of the First Arab-Israeli War. The war was a crucible of military confrontations, political maneuverings, and human tragedies. It saw the young state of Israel defending its declared territory against a coalition of Arab states. By the time armistice agreements were signed in 1949, the map had changed. Israel had not only maintained its existence but expanded its territory, while the remaining Palestinian territories were divided among Jordan and Egypt. Now let's talk about the Green Line, the armistice line drawn in 1949, which ended the hostilities of the 1948 war. This line was supposed to be a temporary border, but it turned into a long-standing demarcation, a symbol of the division between Israel and its neighbors. It's crucial to understand the Green Line's inception and its implications as it continues to be a point of contention in the modern-day Israel-Palestine conflict. The aftermath of the 1948 war was a time of reckoning. For Israel, it was the beginning of statehood, a time to build a nation amidst the ruins of war. For Palestinians, it was a time of loss, known as Nakba, or catastrophe, marking the displacement of a significant portion of the Palestinian population. The 1948 war was not just about changing borders, it was about changing demographics, changing narratives, and changing realities. The repercussions of this war resonated through the decades, setting a precedent for the military confrontations and peace negotiations that followed. This era sowed the seeds of a conflict that would grow and morph into a complex and often violent struggle, setting the stage for the numerous subsequent confrontations between Israel and its Arab neighbors. The socio-political landscape was irrevocably altered and the narratives solidified, creating a legacy that would echo through the generations, leading to the continued conflict we see today. As we delve into the subsequent military confrontations in the following lectures, the echoes of the 1948 war will reverberate through, underlining the cyclical nature of the conflict and the deep-rooted issues that continue to fuel the discord between Israelis and Palestinians. Thus, the events of 1948 are not merely historical occurrences but formative episodes that have cast long shadows over the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Shadows that continue to shape the dynamics of the ongoing war in Gaza in 2023. As we move forward into the 1970s, we encounter a time of renewed military confrontations and diplomatic endeavors. The period was kicked off with the Yom Kippur War in 1973, followed by the Camp David Accords in 1978, each with lasting repercussions on the Israeli-Palestinian narrative. The Yom Kippur War, also known as the October War, saw Egypt and Syria launching a coordinated attack against Israel on the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur. This surprise attack aimed to reclaim territories lost in the Six-Day War, primarily the Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights. The war was brutal, with heavy casualties on all sides. It ended with a ceasefire, but the initial Arab successes restored a sense of pride and military credibility to Egypt and Syria, albeit the territories remained under Israeli control. This war was a wake-up call for Israel, highlighting its vulnerability despite its previous military successes. It also led to a shift in the geopolitical landscape, paving the way for diplomatic engagements. Now, on to the Camp David Accords of 1978, a significant stride towards peace in the Middle East. The accords were brokered by US President Jimmy Carter between Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin. The negotiations resulted in two agreements: the framework for peace in the Middle East and the framework for the conclusion of a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel. The first framework aimed at establishing a format for comprehensive peace in the Middle East, including a plan for self-government for the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. The second framework led to the Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty in 1979, where Egypt officially recognized the State of Israel and Israel agreed to withdraw from the Sinai Peninsula. The Camp David Accords were a monumental step towards peace, marking the first recognition of Israel by an Arab country. However, they were also met with criticism, especially from other Arab states and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, who felt that the agreements fell short of addressing the core issues of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, particularly Palestinian self-determination and statehood. The accords set a precedent for subsequent peace negotiations, showcasing the potential for diplomatic solutions while also highlighting the complexities and roadblocks on the path to a comprehensive peace. The Yom Kippur War and Camp David Accords encapsulate a period of military confrontations and diplomatic engagements, reflecting the cyclical nature of the conflict and the delicate balance between war and peace. The events of this period reverberated through the decades, influencing the strategies, perceptions, and actions of the key players in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The intricacies of this period provide a prism through which we can analyze the evolving dynamics of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, offering invaluable insights as we continue to unravel the complex narrative leading up to the Israel-Gaza War of 2023 in our subsequent lectures. We now transition into a period marked by civil uprisings within the Palestinian territories known as the Intifadas. These were pivotal moments, shedding light on the palpable frustrations and aspirations of the Palestinian populace. The first Intifada erupted in 1987, stemming from long-standing grievances against Israeli occupation and the quest for Palestinian self-determination. The uprising was characterized by widespread protests, general strikes, and confrontations with Israeli security forces across the West Bank and Gaza Strip. It wasn't a heavily armed conflict, but was marked by stone-throwing, Molotov cocktails, and other forms of civil disobedience against the Israeli military presence. In response to the unrest, Israeli forces employed various measures to maintain control, which often led to violent confrontations. The image of stone-throwing Palestinian youths confronting armored military vehicles became emblematic of the struggle. During this period, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, under Yasser Arafat, gained momentum as a representative body for Palestinians. The Intifada also led to the Madrid Conference in 1991, setting the stage for the Oslo Accords, which we'll discuss in the next lecture. Moving on to the Second Intifada, which commenced in 2000, following the failure of the Camp David 2000 summit to reach a final agreement. The trigger was often cited as Ariel Sharon's controversial visit to the Temple Mount or Haram al-Sharif. This uprising was more violent, involving armed attacks, suicide bombings, and military operations, reflecting a heightened level of hostility. Israel responded with military incursions, checkpoints, and the construction of the West Bank barrier, aimed at halting the violence, but also significantly affecting the daily lives of Palestinians. The Second Intifada had a profound impact not only in terms of casualties, but in shaping the political climate. It saw the rise of Hamas as a key player in Palestinian politics, especially after their victory in the 2006 Palestinian legislative elections, which further complicated the Palestinian political landscape. The events of these intifadas brought the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to global attention, highlighting the stark realities of occupation, the aspiration for self-determination, and the cycle of violence that engulfed both communities. The discontent, aspirations, and political developments during these uprisings provided a fertile ground for further discord and played a significant role in shaping the attitudes, policies, and narratives that continued to evolve, leading up to the present-day context of the Israel-Gaza conflict of 2023. The intifadas were not just isolated eruptions of violence, they were manifestations of underlying issues and a reflection of the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They showcased the challenges, the stakes, and the human toll embedded within this protracted struggle, aspects that we'll further explore as we delve into more recent developments in the following lectures.
We have now arrived at the most recent chapter of the Israeli-Palestinian narrative, the Israel-Gaza War of 2023. This conflict, as the latest manifestation of the long-standing strife, embodies a myriad of complexities rooted in the historical, political, and social fabric we've traversed in our preceding lectures. The war's inception can be traced to a blend of long-standing grievances, immediate provocations, and a volatile regional backdrop. The persistent blockade on Gaza, the political division between Fatah and Hamas, and the unresolved status of Jerusalem are among the core issues that continue to fuel the discord. The immediate triggers included escalations in Jerusalem and a surge of rocket attacks from Gaza into Israeli territory, met with robust military responses by Israel. The conflict was marked by extensive aerial bombardments, rocket attacks, and a humanitarian crisis exacerbated by the destruction of essential infrastructure in Gaza. The international community played a role in brokering ceasefires, albeit the underlying issues remain unaddressed, leaving the region in a fragile state of calm. The consequences of this war are multidimensional. On a human level, the toll was heavy, with loss of life and displacement. Politically, the war further strained the already tenuous relations between Israel and the Palestinian factions, and exposed the deep-rooted mistrust that impedes progress towards a lasting solution. Internationally, the war reignited discourse around the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, prompting calls for renewed efforts towards a sustainable resolution. The conflict also highlighted the role of regional and international actors, whose interests and actions continue to influence the dynamics on the ground. The Israel-Gaza War of 2023 is not an isolated event, but a continuation of the cyclical violence emblematic of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It underscores the urgency and the challenge of addressing the root causes to pave the way for a just and enduring peace. As we conclude this week's exploration, it's imperative to reflect on the intertwined narratives, the recurring themes of military confrontation and diplomatic endeavors, and the enduring quest for self-determination and security that define the Israeli-Palestinian saga. Our journey through the annals of this conflict equips us with a nuanced understanding, enabling a deeper analysis as we engage with contemporary discussions and potential pathways towards resolution in the subsequent lectures of this course.
Transitioning from the political discord and territorial divisions, we now delve into a series of military confrontations that significantly exacerbated the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, with a spotlight on Gaza. The cycle of violence escalated in late 2008 with Operation Cast Lead, a 3-week armed conflict between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. The operation was initiated by Israel, citing the incessant rocket fire from Gaza into Israeli territory and the objective to improve the security of its residents. The operation saw extensive aerial bombardments and ground incursions by Israel, resulting in a high number of casualties, with the majority being Palestinian civilians. The international community reacted with a mix of condemnation and concern, highlighting the disproportionate use of force and the humanitarian crisis that ensued. The events of Operation Cast Lead left a scar on the region, exacerbating mistrust and hatred between the communities. As we move into 2012, we encounter another significant military confrontation known as Operation Pillar of Defense. Once again, the trigger was continuous rocket fire from Gaza, and the operation aimed at crippling Hamas's military capabilities. The week-long operation saw intensive aerial exchanges ending with an Egyptian-brokered ceasefire. Despite the cessation of hostilities, the underlying issues remained unresolved, keeping the region on a knife edge. The cycle of violence continued with Operation Protective Edge in 2014, a 7-week confrontation triggered by the abduction and murder of 3 Israeli teenagers, followed by a revenge killing of a Palestinian teenager. The operation saw extensive ground incursions, aerial bombardments, and rocket fire, resulting in a heavy toll on both civilian and military lives. Each of these operations carried a narrative of defending civilian populations from the other side's aggression, yet they all ended with a ceasefire that brought temporary calm but left the fundamental issues unaddressed. The repeated military confrontations displayed a pattern, a rhythmic cycle of escalation, conflict, and temporary cessation. The cumulative effect of these confrontations was profound, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, intensifying the animosity and deepening the divide between Israelis and Palestinians. They also showcased the limitations of military solutions in addressing the root causes of the conflict. These episodes are emblematic of a protracted conflict, where military confrontations serve as flashpoints, revealing the deep-seated grievances, fears, and aspirations of both sides. The echo of these confrontations reverberates through to the current Israel-Gaza War of 2023, underscoring the entrenched nature of the conflict and the challenges that lie ahead in the quest for a sustainable resolution. These confrontations, their causes and repercussions, are critical to understanding the prevailing dynamics as we move closer to dissecting the contemporary state of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the upcoming lectures. As we approach the present era, we will explore the diplomatic endeavors and the unresolved issues that continued to permeate the Israeli-Palestinian narrative from 2015 to 2022. This period saw efforts to rekindle the peace process, alongside the burgeoning of international recognition for Palestinian statehood, juxtaposed against a backdrop of lingering and unresolved issues. In the realm of diplomacy, various international actors attempted to revive the peace process. Notable among these were initiatives led by the United States, including the release of a peace plan titled Peace to Prosperity in 2020. However, these efforts were often met with skepticism and did not result in significant breakthroughs. The peace plan, for instance, was rejected by Palestinian leadership due to perceived biases and its failure to address key Palestinian demands such as a capital in East Jerusalem. Simultaneously, the international recognition of Palestinian statehood gained some traction. Numerous countries and international bodies affirmed their recognition of Palestine as a state, although it remains without full United Nations membership. This period also saw Israel normalizing relations with several Arab states through the Abraham Accords, a development that somewhat shifted the regional dynamics, albeit without directly addressing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. On the ground, the unresolved issues continued to fester. The expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank persisted, often cited as a significant roadblock to the two-state solution. The humanitarian situation in Gaza remained dire, exacerbated by a blockade and recurring military confrontations. The political division between Fatah and Hamas endured, impeding a unified Palestinian front in negotiations. Additionally, the status of Jerusalem remained a core and unresolved issue, with both Israelis and Palestinians holding deep-seated historical, religious, and national claims to the city. The U.S. decision to move its embassy to Jerusalem in 2018 further intensified the discourse around the city's status. These years also witnessed recurring cycles of violence, with sporadic escalations between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. The lack of a political horizon, coupled with the unresolved core issues, maintained a status quo of tension and periodic violence. As we navigate through this recent history, the intricacies of the ongoing conflict become more apparent. The amalgam of diplomatic efforts, international recognition, and unresolved core issues underscore the complex and multifaceted nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This period sets the stage for our exploration of the Israel-Gaza War of 2023 in the next lecture, where we will delve into the most recent eruption of violence, its causes, and its implications on the ever-evolving narrative of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Today, we step onto the global stage to unravel the early international involvement in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Our journey begins in 1947 with the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine proposing a plan to partition the British Mandate of Palestine into two states, one Jewish and one Arab. This plan was adopted by the UN General Assembly as Resolution 181, setting in motion a sequence of events that would lead to the creation of the State of Israel and the First Arab-Israeli War in 1948. The international community, through the UN, was now directly involved in the conflict from its inception. Now, as we move into the 1950s and 60s, the Cold War politics between the United States and the Soviet Union began to cast a long shadow over the Middle East. The region became a chessboard for global powers, each vying for influence and control. The US and Soviet Union backed different sides in the Arab-Israeli wars, with the US generally supporting Israel and the Soviet Union supporting Arab states. The Suez Crisis of 1956 is a clear example of this tug-of-war, where international pressure from both superpowers played a role in resolving the crisis, showcasing the region as a theater for global geopolitics. The Six-Day War of 1967 was another crucial juncture where international dynamics played out. Following the war, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 242, calling for the withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from territories occupied during the conflict and the acknowledgement of the sovereignty of every state in the area. This resolution became a cornerstone for many subsequent peace negotiations, emphasizing the role of international law and diplomacy in attempting to steer the conflict towards a resolution. In the 1970s, the Yom Kippur War brought about a change in the global stance towards the Middle East. The war prompted the US to initiate a new peace process, leading to the Camp David Accords between Egypt and Israel in 1978, brokered by US President Jimmy Carter. This was a significant instance of international diplomacy aiming to untangle the complex web of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Throughout this period, the international community's involvement was not merely an external force, but became ingrained in the fabric of the conflict. The global geopolitical dynamics, the Cold War rivalry, and the efforts of international diplomacy were now intertwined with the regional aspirations, grievances, and actions of the local actors. The early international involvement laid down a framework, setting precedents for how global powers would engage with the conflict, and setting the stage for the international diplomatic endeavors that would follow in the subsequent decades. The actions and reactions of the international community during this period were instrumental in shaping the course of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, laying down a path that we will continue to explore as we delve deeper into the international reactions and diplomatic efforts in the following lectures. We continue our exploration by delving into a series of significant peace processes and accords from the 1970s through the 1990s. This era was marked by a shift from overt military confrontation towards diplomatic engagements, albeit with varying degrees of success. Beginning with the Camp David Accords of 1978, this was a monumental stride, marking the first peace treaty between Israel and an Arab state, Egypt. The accords were brokered under the auspices of the United States, signifying the influential role of international mediation in the conflict. The treaty resulted in Israel's withdrawal from the Sinai Peninsula and the normalization of relations between Egypt and Israel. However, the accords fell short of addressing the broader Palestinian issue, a shortfall that would reverberate through subsequent peace initiatives. Transitioning into the 1990s, the Madrid Conference of 1991 was another significant diplomatic endeavor, orchestrated post the Gulf War, aiming to bring together Israeli, Lebanese, Jordanian, Syrian, and Palestinian representatives for peace talks. The conference set the stage for bilateral negotiations, but the road to a comprehensive peace remained elusive. Now, the Oslo Accords of 1993 and 1995 were landmark agreements between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO. Initiated in secrecy in Oslo, Norway, and later formalized in Washington, D.C., the Accords established a framework for future negotiations and created the Palestinian Authority, granting it limited self-governance over parts of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. The handshake between Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat on the White House lawn symbolized a moment of hope. Yet the accords were met with opposition from various factions within both Israeli and Palestinian societies. The Hebron Protocol of 1997 and the Wye River Memorandum of 1998 were subsequent agreements aiming to implement aspects of the Oslo Accords, focusing on redeployments and security arrangements. However, the momentum of the peace process started to wane, facing hurdles from both security concerns and political opposition. As we approach the end of the 20th century, the Camp David 2000 summit was a high-stakes attempt to reach a final status agreement, addressing core issues such as Jerusalem, refugees, and settlements. Despite intense negotiations, the summit ended without an agreement, exemplifying the deep-seated challenges that persisted in reaching a comprehensive peace. The diplomatic engagements during this period showcased a blend of hope, compromise, and the enduring hurdles that stood in the way of a lasting resolution. The international community, notably the United States, played a crucial role in facilitating these peace processes, yet the elusive nature of a sustainable peace underscored the intricacies of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The oscillation between hope and despair, between progress and setback, painted a vivid picture of the diplomatic labyrinth that characterized the Israeli-Palestinian narrative. The peace processes and accords of this era were both a reflection and a precursor to the ongoing quest for a resolution, a quest that carried with it the aspirations and the apprehensions of both Israelis and Palestinians as they navigated the turbulent waters of diplomacy in a quest for peace, a theme we will continue to explore as we move through the subsequent lectures. As we venture further into the international dynamics of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the role of the United States emerges as a dominant force in the diplomatic arena. The US, with its strategic interests in the Middle East, has been an indispensable player in the unfolding narrative of this conflict. In the early years following Israel's independence, the US established itself as a principal ally of Israel, a relationship underpinned by shared democratic values, strategic interests, and later, a strong bond with the Israeli populace and a committed pro-Israel lobby within the US. This alliance was not merely symbolic, but translated into substantial military, economic, and diplomatic support, which significantly bolstered Israel's position on the global stage. Simultaneously, the US navigated its relations with Arab states, primarily driven by energy interests and geopolitical considerations during the Cold War era. Balancing its alliance with Israel while maintaining amicable relations with oil-rich Arab states was a diplomatic tightrope the US had to traverse. Now, as a mediator in the peace process, the US spearheaded several significant diplomatic initiatives. The Camp David Accords of 1978, brokered by President Jimmy Carter, was an early testament to the US's mediation role. This initiative, leading to a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, set a precedent for US-led diplomacy in the region. The US's role as a mediator continued to evolve with subsequent administrations. The Madrid Conference of 1991, orchestrated by President George H.W. Bush, and the Oslo Accords facilitated during President Bill Clinton's tenure, were critical junctures where the US endeavored to bridge the gaps between the conflicting parties. Yet, challenges persisted. The US's perceived bias towards Israel often emerged as a hurdle in mediating the conflict, impacting the trust among Palestinian and broader Arab constituencies. This perception was further magnified during contentious moves such as the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital by President Donald Trump in 2017, a decision that stirred significant backlash in the Palestinian territories and beyond. The US also engaged in direct financial aid to the Palestinian Authority and humanitarian aid to Gaza, alongside its military aid to Israel, portraying a dual role of supporting both security for Israel and development for the Palestinians. However, the peace process remained stalled, with cyclical bouts of violence and fleeting hopes of resolution. The US's diplomatic clout was both a beacon of hope and a point of contention in the convoluted landscape of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The US engagement in the conflict is emblematic of the broader international dynamics that have shaped the Israeli-Palestinian narrative. The interplay between domestic politics, global geopolitics, and on-the-ground realities in the Middle East has rendered the US's role complex and pivotal. As we dissect the US's involvement, we also glimpse the overarching theme of international influence and its implications on the trajectory of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a theme that we will continue to delve into as we progress through our exploration in the subsequent lectures. As we progress in our exploration, we come across the role of Arab states in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a role marked by historical hostilities, changing alliances, and evolving diplomatic endeavors. Central to this discussion is the Arab Peace Initiative, a significant proposal aimed at forging a comprehensive resolution to the conflict. Historically, Arab states have been staunch supporters of the Palestinian cause, often resulting in military confrontations with Israel. The wars of 1948, 1967, and 1973 exemplify the Arab-Israeli hostilities rooted in the broader conflict over Palestine. However, over the decades, the stance of some Arab states began to shift, moving towards a more diplomatic engagement with Israel, driven by regional geopolitical considerations and international pressures. The Arab Peace Initiative, unveiled in 2002 by then Crown Prince Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, emerged as a groundbreaking proposal within this changing landscape. The initiative offered full normalization of relations between Israel and the Arab states in exchange for a complete withdrawal from the occupied territories, a just solution to the Palestinian refugee problem, and the establishment of a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. The initiative was endorsed by all 22 members of the Arab League, marking a significant shift in the Arab world's official stance towards Israel. However, the Arab Peace Initiative faced hurdles from the onset. Israel had reservations regarding some of the terms, particularly around the return of refugees and the complete withdrawal from the occupied territories. The lack of trust and the differing interpretations of the initiative's terms hindered its progress. Moreover, the internal discord among Arab states, often exacerbated by broader regional rivalries, impacted the unified front initially presented through the Arab Peace Initiative. The varying levels of enthusiasm towards normalization with Israel, as seen in the recent Abraham Accords, further illustrate the fragmented stance within the Arab League. Despite these challenges, the Arab Peace Initiative remains a significant reference point in the discourse around the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. It showcased a willingness within the Arab world to engage diplomatically with Israel, a shift from the traditional stance of outright hostility. Furthermore, the initiative also underscored the interconnectedness of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with broader Arab-Israeli relations, illustrating that a resolution to the conflict is not merely a bilateral endeavor, but one deeply embedded within the regional and international geopolitics. The role of Arab states and the Arab Peace Initiative in the Israeli-Palestinian narrative provides a lens through which we can further understand the complex interplay of regional and international dynamics that continue to shape the trajectory of the conflict, a theme that we will further delve into as we navigate through the remaining lectures of this week. Today, we navigate through the role of the European Union, EU, and the Middle East Quartet in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, two entities that have sought to foster peace amidst a turbulent regional landscape. The EU, being a significant actor on the global stage, has vested interests in the Middle East due to its geographical proximity and the intertwined economic, security, and humanitarian concerns. Over the decades, the EU has been a proponent of the two-state solution, advocating for a viable state of Palestine living side by side with Israel in peace and security. The EU's engagement has manifested in various forms. Financially, it has been a significant aid donor to the Palestinian Authority and has contributed to humanitarian and development projects in both the West Bank and Gaza. Diplomatically, it has aimed to facilitate dialogue between the conflicting parties. albeit with limited success due to the complex geopolitical dynamics and the often more dominant role of the United States in the peace process. Now, transitioning to the Middle East Quartet, this entity emerged in 2002, comprising the United Nations, the United States, the European Union, and Russia. The formation of the quartet was an acknowledgement of the multifaceted international involvement required to tackle the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The quartet aimed to mediate peace negotiations and proposed the Roadmap for Peace in 2003, a plan envisioning a two-state solution through a phased approach. The quartet's roadmap outlined clear phases, benchmarks, and timelines to address key issues such as settlements, Palestinian institution building, and security concerns. However, the implementation of the roadmap faced numerous obstacles, not least the lack of political will from the conflicting parties and the continued cycle of violence. The EU and the Quartet represent facets of collective international efforts to mediate the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Their involvement underscores the global recognition of the conflict's complexity and the understanding that a collective multilateral approach might hold the key to a viable resolution. However, the effectiveness of both the EU and the Quartet has been hampered by various factors, including the differing political stances among EU member states, the lack of enforcement mechanisms for the Quartet's proposals, and the overarching geopolitical rivalries that often overshadow the peace initiatives. These endeavors, while noble in their intent, bring to the forefront the challenges of international mediation in a protracted conflict deeply rooted in historical, political, and social discord. The intricate dance of diplomacy conducted by the EU and the Quartet amidst the volatile backdrop of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict sheds light on the broader theme of international involvement, its potentials, its limitations, and its implications on the quest for a lasting peace. A narrative that continues to unfold as we delve deeper into the subsequent lectures. Today, we delve into the role of the United Nations and international law in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The United Nations, as a paramount international body, has been actively involved in this conflict right from its inception, and international law has often served as a reference point in discussions surrounding the conflict. In 1947, the UN adopted the Partition Plan, marking its first significant intervention in the conflict, facilitating the establishment of Israel. Since then, the UN has played a multifaceted role through its various organs and agencies. Its involvement has spanned from humanitarian assistance to Palestinians, provided chiefly through UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, to numerous resolutions aimed at addressing the conflict's core issues. One pivotal resolution is UN Security Council Resolution 242, adopted post the Six-Day War of 1967. This resolution emphasized the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war and called for Israel's withdrawal from territories occupied during the war. This resolution has since become a cornerstone for many subsequent peace initiatives. International law, encompassing conventions, treaties, and international customary laws, has often been cited in discussions surrounding the conflict. Key principles such as the Fourth Geneva Convention, which deals with the protection of civilians in times of war and occupation, have been referenced concerning Israel's settlement activities and its military operations in the Palestinian territories. The International Court of Justice, ICJ, also weighed in on the conflict in 2004 when it issued an advisory opinion on the legality of the separation barrier constructed by Israel in the West Bank. The ICJ deemed the barrier illegal where it deviates into Palestinian territory and called for its dismantlement. Despite these legal frameworks and pronouncements, enforcement has remained a challenge. The lack of a binding enforcement mechanism often leaves UN resolutions and international law principles without the teeth necessary for effective implementation. Moreover, the politicized nature of the UN, especially within the Security Council, where veto power can halt resolutions, has often impeded a unified international stance on the conflict. This political divide reflects the broader geopolitical rifts that characterize the international community's engagement With the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the narrative of the UN and international law within the Israeli-Palestinian saga reflects a broader theme of the quest for justice, accountability, and resolution within a complex, multifaceted, and protracted conflict. The role of international norms and institutions sheds light on both the potential and the limitations inherent in the global community's efforts to navigate and resolve the intricate maze that is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a theme we'll continue to unravel as we proceed through our course. Today, we navigate the humanitarian landscape of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, spotlighting the role of international non-governmental organizations, NGOs, in alleviating the human cost borne by civilians amidst the enduring hostilities. The conflict has wrought significant humanitarian challenges, prominently in Gaza, but also in parts of the West Bank. The blockade on Gaza, imposed by Israel and Egypt citing security concerns, coupled with recurrent military escalations, has exacerbated living conditions, impeded access to basic services, and stifled economic opportunities. The West Bank, while less dire, faces restrictions, displacements, and a fragmentation of territory that hampers normal life and development. International NGOs have been active players in addressing these humanitarian needs. They provide a gamut of services including medical aid, food security, education, water, and sanitation services, often filling the void where local institutions fall short. Organizations like Médecins Sans Frontières, the International Committee of the Red Cross, and Save the Children, among others, have been pivotal in delivering humanitarian aid and drawing global attention to the plight of civilians living under the shadow of conflict. However, the work of these NGOs is not without challenges. Access restrictions, particularly in Gaza, hinder the timely delivery of aid. Moreover, the political sensitivities surrounding the conflict often spill into the humanitarian domain, with accusations of bias or political affiliations leveled against NGOs, at times impacting their operations and the neutrality perceived in their humanitarian mandate. These NGOs also play a crucial role in documenting and reporting on the human rights conditions within the territories. Through their reports and advocacy, they aim to hold the conflicting parties accountable, urging adherence to international humanitarian and human rights laws. Their voices are crucial in echoing the humanitarian and human rights implications of the conflict on the global stage. Furthermore, these organizations often engage in advocacy, urging the international community to take concerted action to alleviate the humanitarian crisis and address the root causes of the conflict. Their work underscores the interconnectedness of humanitarian aid, human rights, and the broader political resolutions necessary to ameliorate the living conditions of the affected populations. The humanitarian narrative within the Israeli-Palestinian conflict reflects the profound human cost embedded within the political and military confrontations. The endeavors of international NGOs illuminate the persistent efforts to alleviate suffering and uphold human dignity amidst a tumultuous and often despairing reality. This humanitarian dimension adds a layer of complexity to the conflict, reinforcing the urgency for a sustainable political solution that transcends temporary relief and extends to a lasting resolution that addresses the core issues fueling the conflict. A narrative we will continue to dissect as we traverse through the subsequent topics in our course. As we transition into the modern era, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict witnesses the emergence of new diplomatic actors. Today, we'll discuss the involvement of emerging powers such as China and Russia, and how their engagement reflects the shifting diplomatic fronts of the 21st century. China's rise as a global power has been accompanied by a gradual increase in its involvement in Middle Eastern affairs. While traditionally maintaining a low profile, China has begun to express more substantial interest in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, advocating for a two-state solution and offering to mediate peace talks. The Middle East is crucial for China's Belt and Road Initiative, a grand infrastructure project aiming to enhance connectivity between China and the rest of Eurasia. China's growing investments in Israel and its traditional support for Palestine reflect a balanced approach, albeit driven by economic and strategic interests rather than a quest for a decisive role in the peace process. Russia, on the other hand, has historical ties to the region and has maintained a consistent interest in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Russia's stance often aligns with the broader international consensus supporting a two-state solution. Moreover, Russia has sought to position itself as a mediator, hosting various rounds of talks and discussions, reflecting a desire to enhance its regional influence and fill the diplomatic vacuum whenever it arises. These emerging powers are navigating a complex geopolitical landscape, characterized by long-standing U.S. influence, regional rivalries, and the enduring Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Their engagement is emblematic of the multipolar world we find ourselves in, where various powers vie for influence and opportunities in a region that continues to be a central node in global geopolitics. Moreover, the engagement of China and Russia underscores the fluidity of the diplomatic landscape surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. As new actors enter the fray, they bring with them different priorities, strategies, and geopolitical baggage, adding layers of complexity to the already intricate diplomatic puzzle. This diversification of diplomatic actors also signifies a potential for new dynamics, fresh perspectives, and maybe novel pathways towards a resolution. While the effectiveness and sincerity of these new diplomatic fronts remain to be seen, their emergence reflects the evolving and multifaceted nature of international engagement in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. As we dissect the roles of these emerging powers, we glimpse the broader theme of a changing global order and its implications on the quest for a resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The interplay between old and new diplomatic actors, their converging and diverging interests, and their impact on the ground realities provide a rich tapestry of insights as we continue to explore the international dimension of this protracted struggle in the final segment of this week's lectures. Today, we delve into the realm of grassroots movements within Israel, a significant domain where societal engagement intersects with the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict narrative. These movements often serve as conduits for public sentiment, advocacy, and social change, playing a pivotal role in shaping the discourse surrounding the conflict and other societal issues. One of the notable grassroots movements in Israel is the Peace Now movement, established in 1978. This movement advocates for a peaceful resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through a two-state solution. Over the years, it has organized numerous rallies, campaigns, and public discussions aimed at promoting peace and opposing settlement expansion in the occupied territories. In contrast, there are grassroots movements that support the settlement enterprise, like the Yesha Council, which represents the settlers in the West Bank. These movements advocate for the rights of Jewish settlers and often lobby against any concessions in the occupied territories. Moreover, social justice movements have also emerged in Israel, addressing a range of issues beyond the conflict. For instance, the 2011 social justice protest saw hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets demanding affordable housing, lower living costs, and better social services. This movement showcased the ability of grassroots initiatives to mobilize mass engagement and bring domestic issues to the forefront of the political agenda. Additionally, movements like Breaking the Silence, composed of Israeli veterans who share their experiences serving in the occupied territories, aim to spark discussion about the realities of the occupation. On the other hand, organizations like Im Tirtzu often challenge the narratives presented by what they consider to be left-leaning organizations and promote a more nationalist discourse. The women's movement, particularly Women Wage Peace, is another exemplar of grassroots engagement, advocating for a peaceful resolution to the conflict and women's inclusion in peace negotiations. The spectrum of grassroots movements in Israel is broad and diverse, reflecting a myriad of opinions, ideologies, and approaches towards not only the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but also other societal and economic issues. These movements are a testament to the vibrancy of civil society within Israel, representing a microcosm of the broader societal discourse. They also highlight the multiple dimensions of engagement within Israel, where individuals and groups can mobilize around causes they are passionate about, influencing public opinion and, at times, policy. Grassroots movements serve as a crucial avenue for societal engagement and discourse, enriching the democratic process and providing a platform for the myriad voices within Israeli society to be heard. Their existence, campaigns, and advocacy offer a unique lens through which to understand the diverse narratives and sentiments that pervade the Israeli societal and political landscape, aspects that are integral as we continue to explore the socio-political dynamics of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the subsequent lectures of this course. Today's lecture invites us into the domain of grassroots movements within Palestine, a vital arena where public engagement and activism intersect with the broader narrative of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Grassroots movements in Palestine embody a diverse range of ideologies, objectives, and methods, reflecting the complex social and political fabric of Palestinian society. One of the significant grassroots movements is the boycott, divestment, sanctions, BDS movement initiated in 2005. BDS seeks to exert economic and political pressure on Israel to comply with international law, drawing inspiration from the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. Its tactics include boycotting Israeli products and companies that operate in the occupied territories, advocating for divestment from Israeli or international companies involved in violating Palestinian rights, and calling for sanctions against Israel. Similarly, the Great March of Return initiated in 2018 in Gaza, aimed at drawing international attention to the blockade of the Gaza Strip and the right of return for Palestinian refugees. This movement, manifested through weekly demonstrations along the Gaza-Israel border, highlighted the ability of grassroots initiatives to mobilize mass engagement and bring international attention to specific issues within the conflict. On a different note, community-based efforts to improve living conditions, education, and healthcare within the Palestinian territories also reflect the grassroots engagement. Organizations like the Palestinian Agricultural Relief Committees work to support Palestinian farmers and promote food sovereignty, while others focus on education, healthcare, and women's rights, attempting to address the daily challenges faced by Palestinians under occupation. The village-based nonviolent resistance movements such as those in Bilin and Nilin have also garnered international attention. These movements often employ nonviolent protests against the Israeli separation barrier and land confiscations, reflecting a form of grassroots engagement rooted in community action and civil resistance. Youth movements in Palestine are also a notable aspect of grassroots engagement, with young Palestinians mobilizing around various social, economic, and political issues. The emerging digital activism among Palestinian youth is a testament to the evolving nature of grassroots movements in the digital age. The landscape of grassroots movements in Palestine is a mirror reflecting the myriad aspirations, frustrations, and hopes of the Palestinian populace. They are platforms through which ordinary Palestinians can express their grievances, advocate for their rights, and engage with the broader socio-political dynamics surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. These movements, through their diversity and vibrancy, underscore the complexity of the Palestinian societal narrative. They are emblematic of a broader societal engagement and political activism that continues to evolve amidst the challenging circumstances of occupation, political division, and the enduring quest for self-determination and statehood. As we navigate through the grassroots engagements within Palestine, we unravel another layer of the socio-political dynamics that underpin the Israeli-Palestinian narrative, offering a nuanced understanding of the myriad ways through which Palestinians engage with the conflict and advocate for their national aspirations as we continue to explore the socio-political dynamics in the subsequent lectures of this course. Today we venture beyond the borders of Israel and Palestine to explore the realm of international solidarity movements. These movements emanate from various corners of the globe, expressing support for either Israeli or Palestinian causes. They play a significant role in shaping global perceptions of the conflict and often aim to influence international policy. On the Palestinian side, numerous international solidarity movements have emerged over the years, advocating for Palestinian rights and self-determination. These movements often align with broader global justice campaigns, connecting the Palestinian struggle to other global issues like anti-colonialism, anti-racism, and human rights. One notable movement is the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions (BDS) movement, which, although initiated by Palestinians, has garnered a global following. It seeks to pressure Israel economically and politically to comply with international law. The movement has spurred debates and actions in various countries, institutions, and corporations, reflecting its international reach. Other international solidarity initiatives include the International Solidarity Movement, ASM, which invites international activists to participate in nonviolent resistance alongside Palestinians. The presence of international activists is seen as a way to draw global attention to the conflict and to provide some level of protection to Palestinian activists given the often violent responses to protests. On the Israeli side, there are international movements and organizations that express solidarity with Israel and its security concerns. Some of these movements are rooted in political or religious ideologies that view Israel's existence and security as paramount. They often lobby their respective governments to support Israel politically and militarily. Christian Zionism, for instance, is a movement largely based on religious beliefs, and it garners significant support for Israel among certain evangelical Christian communities. They often lobby for pro-Israel policies within their countries, contribute financially, and even travel to Israel to express their support. There are also numerous Jewish diaspora organizations that engage in advocacy for Israel, often focusing on countering delegitimization efforts and promoting a positive image of Israel internationally. Furthermore, the narratives of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict have found resonance among different global movements, whether it's left-leaning movements expressing solidarity with Palestinians or right-leaning movements aligning with Israeli nationalistic narratives. The dynamics of international solidarity movements underscore the global dimension of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They reflect the broader ideological, religious, and political currents that intersect with this local conflict, casting it onto a larger global stage. These movements are not merely external appendages, but are intertwined with the local dynamics of the conflict. They often interact with local actors, influence public discourse, and at times, impact policy both locally and internationally. As we dissect the engagement of international solidarity movements, we gain a broader perspective on the global resonance of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This global dimension is a crucial aspect of understanding the multifaceted narrative of the conflict as we continue to delve into the socio-political dynamics in the subsequent lectures of this course. Today, we shift our gaze towards the diplomatic theater to explore the numerous attempts at mediating peace between Israelis and Palestinians. The diplomatic landscape surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a confluence of myriad international actors, strategies, and initiatives aimed at navigating the turbulent waters of this protracted conflict towards a peaceful harbor. The Oslo Accords of the early 1990s symbolize a hallmark attempt at forging a peaceful pathway. Orchestrated through secret negotiations and facilitated by Norway, the Accords brought about mutual recognition between Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, and established the Palestinian Authority, setting the stage for further negotiations. Following Oslo, numerous initiatives have been proposed, often spearheaded or facilitated by international actors. The United States, playing a predominant role, has overseen several peace initiatives, including the Camp David Summit in 2000, the Roadmap for Peace in 2003, and more recently, the Trump administration's Peace to Prosperity Plan. Each of these initiatives has carried its own set of proposals, yet none have successfully resolved the conflict. The Quartet on the Middle East, comprising the United Nations, the United States, the European Union, and Russia, represents another significant attempt at multilateral mediation, proposing a roadmap towards a two-state solution, albeit with limited success. In addition to these, various other states and international actors have attempted to mediate or facilitate discussions, including Egypt and Jordan, which hold unique positions as neighboring states that have signed peace treaties with Israel. The Arab Peace Initiative of 2002, proposed by Saudi Arabia and endorsed by the Arab League, offered a regional recognition of Israel in exchange for its withdrawal from occupied territories and a just solution to the Palestinian refugee issue. This initiative reflected a broader regional approach to the conflict's resolution. However, despite these myriad diplomatic endeavors, a lasting and comprehensive peace remains elusive. The core issues of the conflict, including borders, settlements, Jerusalem, and refugees, continue to be major stumbling blocks. The divergence in the political will, trust deficits between the parties, and external political and regional dynamics further complicate the peace process. The diplomatic saga surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a testament to the complexity of international mediation in protracted conflicts. It underscores the challenges inherent in bridging deeply entrenched political, ideological, and territorial divides. As we dissect the diplomatic endeavors and international mediation efforts, we gain a deeper understanding of the external dynamics and the international milieu surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. These diplomatic narratives form an integral component of the broader conflict narrative, providing a nuanced lens through which we can analyze the global dimensions and the potential pathways towards a peaceful resolution as we continue to explore the socio-political dynamics in the subsequent lectures of this course. As we delve into Week 4, we confront the humanitarian consequences of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, a topic that's as extensive as it is crucial to understanding the human aspect of this ongoing strife. The humanitarian impact stems from years of conflict, military occupation, political discord, and the socio-economic repercussions thereof. A historical gaze reveals that the humanitarian concerns aren't novel, but have evolved over time. The roots can be traced back to the mass displacement that occurred in 1948, and again in 1967, events that have left an indelible mark on the Palestinian populace. The displacement of populations created a refugee crisis that resonates till today, with millions of Palestinians living as refugees in neighboring countries and beyond, many under dire conditions. Casualties are an unavoidable and tragic aspect of the conflict. The toll it has taken on civilians is profound. Numerous lives have been lost or altered forever due to injuries. The ripple effects of violence extend to the families and communities of the affected, creating a cycle of grief and often a thirst for retribution. Moving on to the realm of basic services, the disparity is evident. Access to healthcare is a cardinal concern, especially in the Gaza Strip, where blockades and recurring military confrontations have severely impacted medical infrastructures. The West Bank, too, faces its share of challenges, with movement restrictions often impeding access to medical facilities. In both areas, shortages in medical supplies and personnel are common, making the provision of quality healthcare a challenge. Education, the cornerstone for a prosperous future, has been heavily impacted. Schools have been damaged or commandeered for military purposes. Teachers and students face difficulties in accessing educational institutions due to movement restrictions, and the psychological trauma borne by children often hampers the learning process. The issue of water, a basic human necessity, presents another layer of humanitarian concern. Access to clean and sufficient water is a challenge, particularly in the Gaza Strip, where over 90% of the water is unfit for human consumption. Sanitation issues further exacerbate public health risks. The livelihoods of many Palestinians have been upended due to restrictions on movement, access to agricultural lands, and economic resources. Unemployment rates are high, particularly among the youth, and many families are reliant on humanitarian aid to meet their basic needs. Food security, closely tied to livelihoods, is a pressing concern. Many households in Gaza and parts of the West Bank struggle to secure enough food, making them reliant on aid agencies for sustenance. In drawing the humanitarian landscape, the role of international and local aid organizations is significant. They provide a lifeline to many Palestinians, offering food, medical care, education, and other essential services. However, the delivery of aid is often hampered by administrative and security constraints, reflecting the broader political complexities entwined with humanitarian action in this setting. The humanitarian narrative of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not just a tale of despair, but also one of resilience, adaptation, and the enduring hope of individuals and communities striving for a semblance of normalcy amidst adversities. This sets the stage for a deeper exploration into each of these humanitarian aspects as we progress through the lectures this week, unveiling the human face of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Today's discourse navigates through the complex arena of displacement and refugees, crucial facets of the humanitarian narrative surrounding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The genesis of the Palestinian refugee crisis is deeply rooted in the historical unfolding of this conflict, marking significant epochs of mass displacement, notably in 1948 and 1967, which have had a lasting impact on the demographic landscape. In the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, often referred to by Palestinians as the Nakba or catastrophe, significant portions of the Palestinian population were displaced from their homes. They fled or were expelled to neighboring countries or other parts of what remained of Palestine. Similarly, the 1967 Six-Day War resulted in another wave of displacement, further exacerbating the refugee dilemma. The plight of Palestinian refugees is characterized by a longing for return, as encapsulated in the right of return, a principle that has remained a core aspect of the Palestinian national movement. Yet, the realization of this right remains elusive amidst the political quagmire of the conflict. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, was established in the aftermath of the 1948 conflict to provide assistance to the Palestinian refugees. Its mandate encompasses education, healthcare, social services, and emergency assistance. UNRWA's role is indispensable for many refugees, yet it operates amidst financial constraints and political scrutiny. The living conditions of Palestinian refugees vary significantly across different host countries. In Jordan, many have been granted citizenship, while in Lebanon and Syria, they often face restrictive policies affecting their employment opportunities and property rights. The conditions in refugee camps range from relatively stable to dire, with overcrowded living conditions, inadequate infrastructure, and limited access to basic services being common challenges. In the occupied Palestinian territories, internally displaced persons, IDPs, represent another facet of the displacement narrative. Their displacement often results from house demolitions, land confiscation, and military operations. They face a myriad of challenges including legal insecurity, inadequate housing, and restricted access to essential services. The diaspora of Palestinian refugees and IDPs is not just a demographic concern, but also a social, political, and humanitarian challenge. The protracted nature of the Palestinian displacement has engendered a sustained refugee crisis, one that epitomizes the enduring humanitarian impact of the conflict. Furthermore, the displacement narrative also encompasses the experiences of Jewish populations from Arab countries, many of whom migrated to Israel around the same time period, adding another layer of complexity to the displacement discourse. The enduring state of displacement and the quest for a durable solution continues to be a significant aspect of the peace discourse, underscoring the necessity to address this issue in any future reconciliation efforts. As we dissect the intricacies of displacement and delve into the lives of refugees and IDPs, we begin to unravel the humanitarian fabric of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This lens offers a poignant perspective on the human cost of the conflict, setting the stage for a deeper understanding of the humanitarian narrative as we traverse through the subsequent lectures in this course. Today, we delve into the grim yet indispensable topic of casualties and the psychological trauma associated with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The human cost of this protracted conflict is profound, with civilians often bearing the brunt of violence, whether through military operations, sporadic outbreaks of violence, or incidents at checkpoints and borders. Casualties, both fatalities and injuries, aren't just mere statistics, but represent lives disrupted, families shattered, and communities deeply scarred. Each casualty has a ripple effect, resonating through families, communities, and across generations. The images of casualties, often disseminated through media and social networks, further fuel sentiments of anger, revenge, and fear among both Israelis and Palestinians. Now let's delve into the psychological realm. The mental health impact of the conflict is colossal. Exposure to violence, loss of loved ones, and the constant state of insecurity foster psychological distress. Disorders such as post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression are prevalent among affected populations. Children, the most vulnerable segment of the population, often exhibit signs of psychological distress. They face nightmares, bedwetting, and behavioral problems. The recurring imagery of violence and the narratives of hatred and fear contribute to shaping their perceptions, attitudes, and interactions with the world around them. The psychological trauma extends to adults as well, impacting their ability to function, maintain relationships, and contribute to their communities. The collective trauma experienced by both Israelis and Palestinians also shapes communal and national identities, further entrenching the divide and mistrust between the two groups. Support systems to address mental health are critical. Various organizations and institutions provide psychological support and counseling to affected individuals and communities. However, the capacity of mental health services often falls short of the vast needs, and the stigma associated with mental health further hampers individuals from seeking support. Furthermore, the resilience displayed by individuals and communities amidst such adversities is noteworthy. Resilience building strategies, community support networks, and individual coping mechanisms play a crucial role in mitigating the psychological impact of the conflict. The narratives of casualties and psychological trauma are not only reflective of the physical and mental toll of the conflict, but also emblematic of the broader societal and communal impact. They underline the urgency for addressing the root causes of the conflict to prevent further loss, suffering, and generational trauma. As we further delve into the humanitarian narrative in the upcoming lectures, the themes of casualties and psychological trauma serve as a stark reminder of the human face of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, urging us to reflect upon the long-term implications of this enduring strife on the social fabric of both societies. Today, we venture into the realm of healthcare, a fundamental human right, yet a contentious issue within the tapestry of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The state of healthcare delineates the stark contrast between the lives of individuals residing in Israel and those in the Palestinian territories. In Israel, a developed healthcare system exists with modern medical facilities, skilled healthcare professionals, and a universal healthcare policy ensuring access to essential services for all citizens. Israel is known for its advancements in medical research and provision of high-quality medical care. Contrastingly, the healthcare system in the Palestinian territories is beset with myriad challenges. In the West Bank, mobility restrictions such as checkpoints and the separation barrier often delay or obstruct access to medical facilities. The situation is even more dire in the Gaza Strip, where a protracted blockade and recurrent military confrontations have left the healthcare infrastructure severely compromised. Medical facilities in Gaza are often overwhelmed, especially during times of heightened conflict when casualty numbers soar. Shortages of essential medicines, medical supplies, and electricity exacerbate the already strained healthcare delivery. The lack of specialized medical care often necessitates referrals to hospitals outside Gaza, yet obtaining permits to exit can be a bureaucratic and time-consuming process, sometimes with detrimental delays for patients in critical conditions. The healthcare workforce is also a concern. Medical professionals in the Palestinian territories face numerous obstacles, including access to continued education and training, exposure to violence, and dealing with the emotional toll of treating victims of the conflict. The emigration of skilled healthcare workers in search of better opportunities further depletes the already scarce human resources. International aid plays a significant role in sustaining the healthcare system, especially in Gaza. Various international and local non-governmental organizations provide essential healthcare services, support medical facilities, and supply much-needed medicines and medical equipment. However, their operations often face funding constraints and political hurdles. In East Jerusalem, the situation is somewhat different. There, Palestinian hospitals provide specialized care not only for residents of East Jerusalem, but also for those from the West Bank and Gaza. However, these hospitals too face financial challenges and restrictions on development and expansion. The healthcare narrative unveils a facet of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict where the disparities are palpable and the human cost is substantial. It emphasizes the intersection of politics, military occupation, and human rights within the domain of healthcare, showcasing the direct and indirect implications of the conflict on individuals' well-being and survival. As we traverse through this narrative, we begin to fathom the depth of humanitarian concerns and the intricacies involved in providing basic human needs amidst a complex political and military landscape, setting the stage for further exploration of humanitarian issues as we progress through this week's lectures. Today we delve into the domain of education, a pivotal aspect of societal growth and individual development, yet a sector significantly hampered in the landscape of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The impact of conflict on education is multifaceted, affecting accessibility, quality, and the overall environment in which learning transpires. In Israel, a structured and well-resourced education system exists, offering a wide range of learning opportunities. However, it's essential to note that discrepancies in resources and opportunities often exist between Jewish and Arab communities within Israel. The landscape shifts drastically as we cross over to the Palestinian territories. Here, education operates under the shadow of military occupation and political discord. The physical infrastructure of education has often been a target during times of heightened conflict. Schools have been damaged and in some cases utilized for military purposes. Students and teachers alike face a daunting challenge in merely reaching their schools due to movement restrictions. Checkpoints, roadblocks, and the separation barrier often result in delays and uncertainty, contributing to a stressful and disruptive learning environment. The curriculum itself becomes a ground of contestation. Education is a tool for national identity construction, and the content of textbooks often reflects the political narratives and historical grievances of each side. The polarized narratives contribute to the perpetuation of fear, hatred, and mistrust among the young generation. Moreover, the psychological trauma induced by the conflict significantly affects the learning capacity of children. The fear and anxiety born out of exposure to violence often manifest in reduced concentration, lower academic achievements, and a higher dropout rate. On a brighter note, several initiatives aim to bolster education under adversity. International and local NGOs have embarked on projects to rebuild and rehabilitate schools, provide psychosocial support to students, and offer training to teachers on dealing with trauma and conflict-sensitive education. Additionally, digital learning initiatives have emerged to circumvent physical restrictions, although they too face challenges, including limited access to technology and the internet, particularly in impoverished areas. The realm of education is a microcosm of the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict, reflecting the dichotomy of adversity and resilience. The efforts to sustain education amidst such adversities underscore the collective aspiration for a better future, and the pivotal role education plays in fostering hope, resilience, and eventually peaceful coexistence. As we transition through the various humanitarian themes, the narrative of education under occupation provides a glimpse into the daily challenges, faced by Palestinians and highlights the indomitable spirit of individuals and communities striving for enlightenment and growth amidst a turbulent and uncertain environment. Today, we traverse into the critical domain of water and sanitation, elementary yet pivotal facets of human existence. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict significantly impacts access to clean water and adequate sanitation, thereby affecting public health and living conditions. Israel, being in a region with scarce water resources, has invested heavily in water management technologies, such as desalination and wastewater recycling. These advancements have alleviated water scarcity within its borders, providing a reliable supply of water for domestic, agricultural, and industrial usage. On the flip side, the scenario in the Palestinian territories is quite grim. The water infrastructure is outdated and suffers from lack of investment and maintenance. The access to water is further constrained by the Israeli control over water resources in the West Bank, where Israel extracts a significant portion of the underground water. This leaves Palestinians with a meager share, often below the minimum recommended by the World Health Organization. The situation in the Gaza Strip is particularly dire. Over-extraction due to population pressures and lack of alternatives has led to the depletion and contamination of the coastal aquifer, the primary source of water in Gaza. Over 90% of the water extracted from the aquifer is unfit for human consumption without treatment. However, the treatment facilities are often non-operational due to power outages and lack of maintenance, rendering the majority of the population reliant on expensive trucked or bottled water. Sanitation is another pressing concern. The inadequate sanitation infrastructure often results in the discharge of untreated or partially treated wastewater into the environment. In Gaza, the situation is exacerbated by the blockade, which restricts the import of essential materials required for the construction and maintenance of sanitation facilities. The discharge of untreated wastewater into the Mediterranean Sea poses serious public health risks and environmental hazards. International aid plays a significant role in addressing water and sanitation challenges in the Palestinian territories. Various projects funded by international donors aim to improve water supply, sanitation facilities, and wastewater treatment. However, these efforts often face bureaucratic hurdles, funding constraints, and other challenges posed by the ongoing conflict and occupation. The theme of water and sanitation is emblematic of the broader humanitarian challenges faced by the Palestinian population. It underscores the intersection of natural resource management, political control, and human rights in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It also emphasizes the critical need for sustainable solutions to address water and sanitation challenges as part of the broader endeavor to improve living conditions and foster a conducive environment for peace. As we delve deeper into the humanitarian narrative in the subsequent lectures, the discourse on water and sanitation serves as a stark reminder of the daily challenges faced by individuals and communities amidst the complex political and military landscape of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Today, we delve into the restrictive matrix of movement and administrative measures that significantly shape the daily realities of Palestinians living under occupation. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict exhibits a complex regime of control and restriction that has profound humanitarian implications. At the forefront are the physical impediments to movement. The omnipresent checkpoints, roadblocks, and the separation barrier significantly hamper the freedom of movement for Palestinians. Whether it's a daily commute to work, a medical emergency, or a visit to a relative, Palestinians often face delays, detentions, and sometimes denial of passage at these military installations. The unpredictability and the often humiliating experience at checkpoints exacerbate the psychological stress borne by many Palestinians. The separation barrier, which Israel asserts was constructed for security purposes, has further bisected communities, separating families, farmers from their lands, and students from their schools. Its route, much of which is constructed inside the West Bank, has also resulted in the annexation of Palestinian land. Now, transitioning to the administrative measures, we encounter a realm of bureaucratic control. The permit regime is a notable feature. Palestinians require permits issued by Israeli authorities for a myriad of purposes, including accessing East Jerusalem, traveling through Israel to reach Gaza or the West Bank, and for working in Israel. Obtaining a permit is often a cumbersome, opaque, and arbitrary process, leaving many in a state of perpetual uncertainty. House demolitions represent another facet of administrative measures. Israeli authorities demolish Palestinian structures deemed as built illegally, although the restrictive planning regime makes it almost impossible for Palestinians to obtain building permits. The punitive demolitions of homes belonging to families of individuals accused of attacks against Israelis add another layer of distress. Land confiscation for the expansion of Israeli settlements and the construction of military zones further erodes the living space and resources available to Palestinians. The settlements, considered illegal under international law, are a significant source of tension and a physical manifestation of occupation. The implications of these movement restrictions and administrative measures are vast. They impede access to essential services like healthcare and education, hinder economic development, disrupt social connections, and deepen the sense of oppression and injustice. These restrictive measures are not merely physical or administrative impediments, but are symbolic of the broader control and domination inherent in the occupation. They reflect the daily indignities and the systemic discrimination faced by Palestinians, further entrenching the conflict and diminishing the prospects for peace. As we progress through the narrative of humanitarian consequences, the discussion on movement restrictions and administrative measures elucidates the structural challenges faced by Palestinians. It invites us to reflect on the imperative of addressing these systemic issues to pave the way for a just and lasting resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Today, we venture into the realm of humanitarian aid and international support, essential lifelines for many Palestinians amidst the adversities they face daily. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, being protracted and highly politicized, presents a complex landscape wherein humanitarian actors operate. The humanitarian interventions in the Palestinian territories encompass a range of activities aimed at alleviating the suffering and addressing the basic needs of the population. These include the provision of food aid, healthcare services, education support, water and sanitation facilities, shelter, and livelihood programs. Numerous international organizations, including UN agencies, international non-governmental organizations, INGOs, and donor countries, are engaged in humanitarian assistance. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, UNRWA, plays a pivotal role in providing education, health, and relief services to Palestinian refugees. Moreover, various NGOs and local non-governmental organizations, NGOs, are actively involved in humanitarian and development projects. Their activities span across sectors such as healthcare, education, water and sanitation, livelihoods, and legal protection. Despite the essential support these entities provide, the delivery of humanitarian aid is often hampered by a range of challenges. Access restrictions imposed by Israeli authorities often delay or obstruct the delivery of aid, particularly to areas in the Gaza Strip and parts of the West Bank. Furthermore, political considerations significantly impact humanitarian operations. The politicization of aid, donor conditions, and the broader political discord between Palestinian factions, as well as between Palestinians and Israelis, often affect the prioritization, funding, and implementation of humanitarian projects. The funding for humanitarian activities is another critical concern. Financial constraints often limit the scope and effectiveness of humanitarian interventions. Funding shortfalls, particularly for UNRWA, have resulted in service reductions, affecting the most vulnerable segments of the population. Also, humanitarian actors often find themselves navigating a fine line between addressing the immediate needs of the population and confronting the root causes of their vulnerability. The occupation, with its associated restrictions and violations, is identified by many humanitarian actors as the primary driver of humanitarian needs in the Palestinian territories. The discourse on humanitarian aid and international support unveils a narrative of resilience, solidarity, and the global response to the humanitarian plight of Palestinians. However, it also reflects the limitations of humanitarian action in the face of a protracted political conflict. As we draw near the conclusion of our exploration into the humanitarian aspects of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the narrative of humanitarian aid accentuates the indelible link between political resolution and sustainable humanitarian betterment. It beckons a reflection on the imperative for a political solution to address the root causes of the humanitarian challenges faced by the Palestinian population. Today we unravel the role of Egypt, a key player in the Arab world, in the Israeli-Palestinian narrative. Egypt shares a border with both Israel and Gaza, placing it in a unique position geographically and politically. Historically, Egypt has been a frontline state in the Arab-Israeli conflict, engaging in several wars with Israel. However, the trajectory changed post the 1979 Egypt-Israel peace treaty, marking a paradigm shift not just in Egypt-Israel relations, but also in the broader Arab-Israeli conflict dynamics. Now transitioning to Egypt's mediation role. Egypt has often played a mediator role in Israeli-Palestinian ceasefires, particularly between Israel and Hamas. Its geographical proximity, historical involvement, and relations with both parties place it in a pivotal position to mediate. Egypt's mediation efforts often intensify during periods of escalated violence in Gaza. The primary aim is usually to broker a ceasefire, halt the violence, and prevent further civilian casualties. It also endeavors to mediate intra-Palestinian disputes, attempting to forge unity between Fatah and Hamas, although with limited success. Egypt's interest in mediation stems from various factors. First, the stability of Gaza impacts Egypt's security, especially in the Sinai Peninsula, where Egypt faces a persistent insurgency. A stable Gaza is seen as conducive to Egypt's own national security. Second, Egypt traditionally sees itself as a leader in the Arab world, and its mediation efforts underscore this role, projecting Egypt as a responsible and key regional actor. The dynamics of Egypt's mediation are complex. The process usually involves intense negotiations with leaders of Hamas, Israeli officials, and sometimes other regional and international actors. Egypt's intelligence agency often plays a crucial role in these negotiations. It's a delicate balancing act for Egypt, maintaining relations with Israel while also engaging with Hamas, which many, including Israel and the US, designate as a terrorist organization. The effectiveness and outcomes of Egypt's mediation efforts vary. While Egypt has been successful in brokering ceasefires and bringing temporary calm to Gaza, these ceasefires have often been fragile with violence, resuming after short periods of calm. The underlying issues of the conflict remain unaddressed in these mediation efforts. Furthermore, Egypt's blockade of Gaza in coordination with Israel is a significant aspect of its Gaza policy. The blockade impacts the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and while Egypt occasionally opens the Rafah crossing, the primary exit and entry point for Gazans, its policy is often seen as contributing to the siege on Gaza. Egypt's role and mediation efforts are essential threads in the complex fabric of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They reflect the broader regional dynamics, the interplay of local, regional, and international actors, and the intricate dance of diplomacy, security considerations, and political interests that shape the response to the conflict. Now, as we delve deeper into the regional responses in the following lectures, the narrative of Egypt's engagement provides a foundation for understanding the intricate and often convoluted regional dynamics that envelop the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We navigate the nuanced role of Jordan, a country with deep-rooted historical ties and engagements with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Jordan's unique position, sharing borders with Israel and the West Bank, has positioned it as a significant actor in the ongoing discourse. The historical backdrop of Jordan's involvement dates back to the aftermath of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, when the West Bank was annexed by Jordan, a period that continued until the 1967 war, when Israel occupied the territory. In 1994, Jordan signed a peace treaty with Israel, marking a significant shift in its foreign policy and setting it apart from many other Arab states. The treaty also marked Jordan's formal relinquishment of claims to the West Bank while retaining a role in the administration of the holy sites in Jerusalem, a role that continues to date and resonates deeply within the Jordanian political and social spectrum. Now let's transition to the refugee issue. Jordan hosts a substantial Palestinian refugee population whose presence significantly impacts its social, political, and economic landscape. The refugee issue is not just a demographic challenge, but is deeply interwoven with Jordan's national identity and political discourse.